Here's what no one wants you to understand. The men you see at the center, the leaders there, chosen ones, they were never the ones shaping everything. But something's been hidden. Look closer, really closer. Because beneath every covenant in the Old Testament, beneath every miracle, beneath every moment that split history in two, there's a woman who made choices that no one talks about, choices that changed everything. And once you see who's really pulling the strings, once you realize what she was willing to sacrifice, what she was willing to risk, everything changes. But who are they? What did they do? Why has history forgotten them? Stay with me, because the moment you find out, you'll never see these stories the same way again. If you're someone who questions religion instead of blindly following it, please subscribe. This channel is for thinkers who want to understand the deeper meaning behind all religions. In this video, we're going back to 3 women in the Torah: Sarah, Rebekah, and Leah. 3 names that changed history, because these women didn't just witness events, they shaped them. They influenced decisions, shifted destinies, and built the world we're living in today. But here's what's shocking. Most people have never heard their real stories. The women who shaped the promise. Her name was Sarah. Not just a name, a title rewritten by God himself, from Sarai to Sarah, meaning princess of nations. She was the wife of Abraham, the friend of God, the father of faith. But behind the honor of standing beside a prophet, Sarah carried something no title could fix. She had no child. Years passed, and the silence in her home became a quiet grief she no longer explained. God had promised Abraham that his family would be as many as the stars, but nothing had happened yet. The stars kept multiplying, and Sarah's arms remained empty. So she made a decision, which was her first powerful moment. In her time, it was normal for a woman who couldn't have children to give her servant to her husband. The child born from her would be considered hers. Sarah had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. She turned to Abraham and said, "Take her. If the promise must continue, let it begin through her." Was it wisdom? Was it a mistake? Or was it both? Hagar became pregnant, and a son was born, and they named him Ishmael. Abraham was 86 years old when Ishmael came into the world. For a brief, golden moment, it felt like the waiting was finally over. Then, 13 years later, strangers arrived. 3 men appeared near Abraham's tent by the oak trees of Mamre. Abraham ran to greet them, bowed to the ground, and offered them food and water. They looked like men, but they were not men. These were angels, and one of them carried a message directly from God. Sarah was inside the tent. She was listening. And then she heard it, a sentence that must have hit her like a wave. "Your wife Sarah will have a son." Sarah laughed, not with joy, not yet, with the quiet, exhausted disbelief of a woman who has hoped too long. "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" she thought to herself. But the angel knew. He turned and asked Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh?" Then came the line that has echoed for millennia: "Is anything too hard for the Lord?" At 90 years old, the impossible happened. Sarah conceived. That was the second most powerful moment in Sarah's life. There is no medical explanation. There is no natural framework. It just happened. And when her son was placed in her arms, she said something beautiful. "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." She named him Isaac, which means he laughs. The same laugh that came from disbelief became the name of the miracle. God didn't erase her doubt. He redeemed it. He turned her skepticism into a name her descendants would carry forever. But joy, in this story, never arrives alone. The tension had always been there, quiet, like a crack in the wall you pretend not to see. But the day Isaac was weaned, at the celebration feast, Sarah saw something. She saw Ishmael, now a teenager, and what she saw disturbed her deeply enough to act. She went to Abraham and made a demand that broke his heart. Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. Abraham was greatly distressed. The text tells us that directly. Ishmael was his son too. He had raised him for over 13 years. But God spoke to Abraham that night. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you. It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. And in the early morning, Abraham gave Hagar bread and a skin of water and sent her and Ishmael into the desert, into the unknown. Here is the question that sits beneath this whole story. If Sarah had never given Hagar to Abraham, would Ishmael have existed at all? Or was her mistake part of the plan? The woman who chose a king. Let's discover the second powerful woman in the Torah. Abraham was old. His son Isaac needed a wife, but not just any wife. She had to be from his own people. The bloodline had to stay pure. The covenant had to remain untouched. So Abraham sent his most trusted servant on a mission that seemed almost impossible. Travel hundreds of miles back to Mesopotamia, to a city he barely remembered, and find the right woman. But how would he even know who she was? The servant stood at a well outside the city as evening fell, the hour when women came to draw water. And he prayed a prayer so specific, it reads almost like a test. Let the girl who offers water not just to me, but also to my camels, let her be the one. He had barely finished the words. Before he could even speak, Rebekah appeared. She drew water for him. She offered it to him, and then, without being asked, without hesitation, she said, I'll draw water for your camels too, until they have had enough. One camel drinks up to 30 gallons of water after a long journey. The servant had 10 camels. Rebekah drew water for all of them, alone, in the dark, without complaint. The servant stood there, trembling, realizing what had just happened. He followed her to her father's house. There he told them everything, the prayer, the sign, the way she appeared, the way she served, without being asked. Her father and brother listened. And then they said something that sealed her fate. This is from the Lord. We can say nothing to you, one way or the other. The decision was made. She was chosen. But here's what they didn't tell her. Rebekah had never seen Isaac. She was leaving everything, her family, her city, her entire world, to travel hundreds of miles toward a man she'd never met, based on a promise whispered by a stranger. 20 years have passed. Rebekah and Isaac were married, and now she was pregnant, carrying the future of the covenant within her. Then, something happened inside her womb, something that terrified her. The children were fighting, not the normal movement of pregnancy. This was a battle, a conflict, so intense that Rebekah was in agony. She went to God, not to Isaac, not to anyone else, directly to God. If this is so, why am I alive? And God answered her with a prophecy that would shake the entire foundation of everything they believed. 2 nations are in your womb. 2 people will be separated from within you. 1 person will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Let that sink in. Rebekah had just been told that everything would be reversed. The firstborn would not inherit. The second son would rise above the first. This was not how it worked. This was not the law of nations. This was not tradition. But God had spoken it directly to her. She gave birth to twins. The firstborn came out red, covered in hair. They called him Esau, the rough one. Bold, physical, a hunter, the kind of son a father loves because he can see himself. The second came out gripping his brother's heel, They called him Jacob, the one who grasps, the supplanter, quiet, thoughtful, watchful. Two entirely different men. Years passed. Isaac grew old, he grew blind, and he knew his time was running short. So he called his firstborn, Esau, and gave him a final mission. Go out, hunt game, prepare a meal for me. Come back so that I may give you my blessing before I die. This wasn't just a meal. This was the blessing. This was the covenant. This was the promise. That would make nations. Rebekah was listening at the tent entrance. She had carried this prophecy for decades. She had watched. She had waited. And now, in the final moment, Isaac was about to give the blessing to the wrong son. The son God had said would serve the other. She moved fast. She called Jacob. She told him everything. Then she said, "Now, my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you." Jacob hesitated. What if my father touches me? I will appear to be tricking him. I will bring down a curse on myself. And Rebekah said the line that has echoed through theology for thousands of years. My son, let the curse fall on me. She was willing to take the curse herself. She was willing to bear the consequences, all to ensure that God's prophecy came true. She prepared the meal. Jacob wore his brother's clothes. She put goatskin on his hands to mimic Esau's hair. Jacob went in. Isaac was suspicious. He asked 3 times, in 3 different ways, "Are you really my son Esau?" Each time, Jacob said yes. The blessing was given. The covenant passed to Jacob. But the question that haunts this story remains. Why didn't Rebekah tell Isaac about God's prophecy? Why didn't she simply tell him the truth? Was she afraid he wouldn't believe her? The woman who saved a nation. Her name was Leah, not the name you immediately think of when you hear the story of Jacob. Most people know Rachel, the beloved wife, the one Jacob worked 14 years to marry. But Leah is the woman they forget, the one he didn't choose, the one the story almost passed by. But here's what changes everything. If you follow the covenant forward, it doesn't travel through Rachel. It travels through Leah. You see, Jacob had been promised the same blessing his father Isaac carried, the same covenant that made nations. But there was a condition he didn't know yet. There was a test he hadn't understood. When Jacob fled from his brother Esau's anger, he arrived at his uncle Laban's house, and there he saw Rachel, beautiful, graceful, the kind of woman a man's heart stops for. Jacob loved her immediately, so much so that when Laban asked what bride price he would pay, Jacob said, "I'll work 7 years for Rachel." 7 years. The text tells us those 7 years felt like mere days because of the love he had for her. Can you imagine that kind of devotion? But on the wedding night, everything changed. Laban had deceived him. He had given Jacob not Rachel, but Leah, Rachel's older sister. The text describes it simply. Leah had weak eyes, while Rachel is described as beautiful and graceful. Leah is the one nobody chose. Jacob discovered the deception in the morning. He was furious. He confronted Laban. "Why have you done this to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I?" And Laban's response reveals the coldness of his business. It is not the practice in our place to give the younger daughter before the older. Fulfill the week of this one, and we will give you the other as well for another 7 years of service. So Jacob worked another 7 years. He married Rachel 1 week later. But there was a wound now, a hierarchy. Rachel was the chosen one. Leah was the mistake, the one he was stuck with. The text tells us plainly, when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he opened her womb. God saw her, not because she was perfect, not because she was beautiful, but because she was unloved. And Leah began to have children. She had a son. She named him Reuben, which means see a son. She was crying out to Jacob, "See, I have given you a son. Look at me." love me. But Jacob's heart remained elsewhere. She had another son. She named him Simeon, which means the Lord has heard that I am unloved. With each name, she was crying out, begging, waiting for Jacob to see her. She had a third son. She named him Levi, which means attached. She whispered her hope, now at last my husband will become attached to me. But Jacob's eyes never changed. She had a fourth son, and this time something shifted. Something broke open inside her. She named him Judah, which means praise. And when he was born, she said something that would change everything. Now I will praise the Lord. That was the first and most powerful moment in Leah's life. She stopped seeking love from a man who would never give it to her, and she found something deeper. She found her identity in something else entirely. Leah had 6 sons and a daughter. Rachel, for years, had none. The beloved wife remained, childless, while the unloved wife bore the covenant forward. And it was through Leah's son Judah that the entire lineage continued. His descendants became the tribe of Judah, and from Judah came King David. From the line of David came Jesus. The woman Jacob didn't choose became the mother of the covenant. The woman the story tried to forget is the woman every Jewish person is named after. Rachel is the wife Jacob's heart belonged to, but Leah is the wife who carried the future. And here is the deepest truth. Leah never needed Jacob's love to matter, because she had already been chosen by God, long before Jacob ever arrived at that well. The question becomes, how many women in our own lives do we overlook because they aren't the ones our eyes immediately fall on? How many Leahs are we walking past, not realizing they are carrying something far more valuable than beauty or being chosen? Her sons built the nation. Her faith rewrote the story, and the world still carries her name. So let's bring it all together. Sarah, a woman who waited 90 years for the impossible. Her powerful moment came when she stopped doubting and let God redeem her skepticism. She named her miracle Isaac, the laugh, and shaped the entire promise. Rebekah, a woman who carried a prophecy in silence for decades. Her powerful moment came when she risked everything, even a curse on her own soul, to ensure God's promise came true. She chose the king. She rewrote the covenant. Leah, a woman who was never chosen, never loved, never seen. Her powerful moment came when she finally understood she didn't need a man's love to matter. She had already been chosen by God. She saved a nation. And every Jewish person who exists today carries her name. 3 women, 3 moments, 3 decisions that echoed through history. So the real question becomes, how many divine messages have been buried because we decided that only men, worthy architects of faith,